Hello, peeps. Welcome back in. I've had some really good response for the last couple of episodes that I've done, and we're gonna expand on that a little bit more. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about today were some things that maybe were said to you by your parents as a child that have not been unsaid, that haven't been talked about. And of course, you know me. I was watching Bridgerton, and and there was a scene in there where it just immediately struck me. And it brought me to this question is, can you be damaged as an adult by things that have been said to you as a young child that then became a narrative for you? Anyway, I'm going to explain this more. It's kind of confusing in my head right now. And so I'm just going to look off of my notes and stuff. But there was a scene in there that really brought this question up of something that was never said, that something that happened that was traumatic, which I will explain to you in a minute. And then it was never talked about. And so it became Colin's truth. And so Colin is one of the stars of this show. And it was very telling once they did a throwback of his childhood and showed what had happened. So hopefully this episode will be thought-provoking on maybe some things that have been unsaid, so things that had happened but no one talked about it, and they held a spot in your body and your mind, and it made you make decisions that were negative in your life. That's what this episode is about. So can it affect you in a way where you made that unsaid thing that you witnessed a truth? And now you're like, well, that's the way life is. So I'm not going to let love in, or I'm not going to trust this thing, or I'm not going to take chances, because when I do, this is what I've seen and learned from. So that must be true. And so therefore I have to just stick to this script that I witnessed as a child. So I always laugh to myself when I see a great quote in a line in a movie. It just makes my heart beat faster. And I'm like grabbing a pen and paper and then the pause button on my Roku, because I know that God is going, this right here, this is a good subject. It's just this feeling I get where I just go, wait, what did they just say? And then you see parts of the movie more, and you realize like there's something there that is really important. And in a movie, like the scenes keep going and everything keeps continuing. So you don't really sit on this one thing all the time, or it is part of an important part of the story, but you can't really dive into it because they have to continue the story. And so for me, when I see those things, I'm like, that right there, those are experiences that hit me. It strikes me to my core, because I realize like, yeah, that kind of thing happened to me and nobody said anything. And so then I, for years, thought that that was true. And then you grow up and you realize it's not true at all. And it was just a trauma effect from something that happened to you that shocked you so much that it made you pause. It made you stop that part of your life. And you didn't take chances from it, or you didn't trust other things from it. So let me describe what I saw. The scene of the first episode of this season started out showing a young Colin, who is the star of Bridgerton, one of the stars, with his father, and they're having a conversation in this beautiful English garden. It's this beautiful, all these beautiful flowers, like, you know how English gardens are. Think of the Windsors, it's like they have these beautiful grounds with lots of flowers. And so that's what they're walking through. And all of a sudden there's bees like all around these flowers. We see them now, like in our backyard, we have these really beautiful yellow flowers. They're like, I don't know what kind of flowers they're like, little dainty yellow flowers, almost like a daisy, but they're not daisies. The bees have come out in full force because they love these flowers. And so we've had more bees surrounding those flowers, and they're all along the sides of the house. but they don't bother us. We just kind of walk by them, whatever, they're fine. In this scene, one of the bees lands on his dad's neck as he's having this important conversation with his son. They're having a beautiful conversation. They're smiling. Everything's great. Okay, imagine this is probably in the 1800s, something like that. They don't have EpiPens. There's no urgent care close by. There's no one around. No one knew about allergic reactions. I mean, they probably did, but they knew they couldn't do anything with it. Or maybe they had some kind of, some kind of homemade whatever that pulled the poison out or something like that. Anyway, by the time he found out what was really going on, his dad had fallen to the ground and he was going into shock. So this was a flashback of the show of Colin. I think he was maybe 10 or 12 years old. More to the story of that, he was one of the oldest sons. His mom had, I think, 5 kids at that point, and she was pregnant with their 6th child. So his mom comes to the door and she's screaming as she sees him on the ground. And it's she wants Colin to save him. But, he's a child and he's in shock and he doesn't know what the heck is happening. And his dad dies in his arms. That is probably the most traumatic that you could ever have happen to you. At the same time, his mom is just almost not blaming him, but just do something, save the day kind of thing, putting this pressure on him. And so there's all these unspoken things, right? And so his dad dies and suddenly, and then the mom goes into labor shortly thereafter, days after, or I think even during that, I can't remember now. It's been a while since I've seen it. And she has put him in the position of now you're the man of the house, which that is not a child's job. We can go into a whole thing of that. And so he took that role on and he was protective of everybody. He did all the right things. It kind of reminds me of just first child syndrome. I know Ariel's mentioned before, I was always a good kid because I felt like I had this job to make you guys proud because you were going through all these things, right? And so I think this is a thing with children is they take on this role of I have to do things really well so that I can relieve the stress off my parents. And yet it's not their job. And so he equated this deep, deep loss, watching his mom completely fall apart. He equated it with, I'm never going to fall in love because that hurts, because people die. And then what? I'm not going to go through that pain. So he was a very good son and he did all the right things and he helped everybody else in the family. And he loved when his siblings fell in love and he supported them. And even if they didn't want to mate up with somebody, one of them became an artist. And, it was just they all had these crazy, quirky personalities, as you do when you have a lot of kids in the family. Everyone has a different personality and he supported all of it. But he wouldn't fall in love. He met this girl all of a sudden and he was wait a minute. I don't want to do that because falling in love hurts. He never got to mourn his father. So that's an unseen trauma that, you just move right into the next position of now I'm the father of the house. And so he didn't take that time to mourn that loss and also realize there was nothing he could have done to have helped that. His dad probably would have died even if it was his mom in the garden with her husband. And so he's experiencing the loss of his father, not only the loss of his father, he died in his arms. And so there's a whole big trauma there. And then just taking on this other role. And so he just decided I will never fall in love again. That's not in the cards for me. Now here's where it gets tricky. His mother knew this His mom she's watching him. She's like, Colin's such a good boy. Colin's such a wonderful man. She never said anything like, hey, Colin, like you're sacrificing everybody else in the family, over yourself. Like you're letting everybody live their most charmed life, but you're not doing that for yourself. There's a critical moment when he meets this girl and he fights really hard not to fall in love with her. And you can see it all over their faces. Like they both thought each other was great. He would talk to her. She was different than any other girl. Of course, this is a whole love story, right? But there is a scene where he's almost giving up the love of his life. She may marry someone else. And he's just like, I don't care. Like, it doesn't matter. Or he's supposed to marry somebody, her sister. It gets really tricky. And he's just doing it out of obligation. And she's just, his mom's like, no, this is not right. You love this other girl. You need to follow your heart. And he's like, no, I don't. Like, that just leads to disaster. You love big, you lose big. Not going to do it. She says this scene in the movie that really struck me. And this is what she said. She said, I am sorry. Sorry it was you who found your father. Sorry for everything that happened in the days that followed. If I could go back and change things, you have no idea how I wish I could change everything. It is what I think about every night before I close my eyes. And then again in the morning when I wake up. It will never go away. So, of course, in the movie, her son, he understands what she's saying and ends up proclaiming his love to the woman that he wants to marry. His mom is crying when she's saying this because she knows, I did this to you. In a way, she did that to keep him close for her. So it was very selfish. And she knew that at the end. She was like, I wake up every morning knowing at some point during his childhood, his teen years, his young adult years, she should have said to him like, hey, listen, that was not your fault. This is not your responsibility. You are not the man of the house. Like, you are my son, but you are not responsible for every child and for me in this family. She didn't do that. And day after day, she knew that when she went to bed at night and when she woke up the next morning. Now, kudos to her as a mom to finally come to him and say, enough is enough. Go marry the woman that you love and stop being stubborn and stop being traumatized by this thing that doesn't exist. It's not true that you can never fall in love again. It is true that you love big and you lose big, because we all do. We love hurts. Like, you're going to lose people that you love. That is the reality. That doesn't mean that you skip out on love. It just means that you love big. Just love big while they're here. Love every day. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. That doesn't mean that we sacrifice that love and say, I'm going to protect it then and not share it with anybody because it's too painful. Because in the interim of that, it's also probably the most wonderful thing you'll ever experience. And wouldn't you like to live a life and just experience that? Okay, so in our unmothered realm, in real life, we don't always get a parent that comes back and admits that they might have done something that has damaged us in that way or traumatized us. Please say, please accept my apology. I want you to start over. That probably, I'm not even going to say always. It probably never happens. It does happen. I believe it can happen. Do I think it happens often? No. And so can we get stuck in thought patterns that don't help us to have healthy relationships? Yeah. Like, we're going to create these truths that are not really true. We're going to protect ourselves. I did this in the beginning when I first met Mike. I had these truths that I failed at a marriage. I've lost a son. I've failed at both motherhood and marriage. Therefore, I will never open myself up. That's probably why my heart beat faster, is because this was me back at 26 years old as saying, I can't allow anyone to love me that big again, because that really hurts, because I did lose somebody too. And that was really painful. And I didn't want to feel that pain again, even though I love love. And so it took Mike to break that barrier down and say, well, I'm going to wait for you. And I'm like, wait, that was not the answer. I wanted you to go away. Was not the answer. And so it takes somebody to break that pattern. And hopefully it's somebody that you love, or someone, hopefully, that is a family member that can come to you and say, those were things that you grew up believing, but that's not true. Is there room for growth even when we don't get an apology from our parents? Of course. Our parents have faults and our parents are faulty. And so there are things that we have to look at and say, well, that was their experience. This is what they thought was right at the time. Even if it was done inadvertently, it may not have been done on purpose. You have to pull that aside and say, it's okay if they don't apologize. I just need to move forward. I just need to keep going and figure out what the truth actually is. And can I expect love to be different? And can I have a heart big enough to hold all of those things no matter what happens? Does our brain have the ability to change? Yeah, that's the beauty of it. As I learned about neuroplasticity, where your brain actually can, through tools and studies, you can actually start switching the things that you've believed in. We're not stuck in one thought process. People will get stuck if they have that mentality of, this is the way we've always done it and it's not going to change because I don't want it to change, then it won't. But your brain has the ability to rethink things. That is why a lot of times people work with PTSD, soldiers from war, different people that have gone through major traumas. You have to retrain the brain so that those things don't affect you in such a strong way anymore. So your brain actually has the ability to relearn. Can God take trauma and actually change us and make us better for it? 100%. It's the whole point of our journey. God will take beauty from ashes, right? We have these scriptures that say that He is beside us through the hard, that when you go through hard, you persevere. He will help you walk through these situations, because nobody goes through these situations scot-free. Nobody goes through life with no situations. Everyone has a situation that is very impactful from our childhood into our adulthood. Do you recognize that things might be skewed by a parent telling you something as a child only to find out it wasn't what it seemed? That's a big one. And I see this happening a lot, where parents will write a story out to the child and use it as truth. And then the kids grow up and say, well, this is what my mom told me, or this is what my dad told me. And you think it's true until it's not. And so it affects your future relationships, because all of those things play a part. That's part of like what we call bringing in the baggage. When you come into a relationship, it's like everyone's bringing their baggage with them, right? And that is part of that, is we're bringing in these narratives and these truths. But are they? And can that affect your relationship, your future relationships, in a negative way? So we don't have to sacrifice our happiness like Colin did in Bridgerton because we think we're being loyal to our parents that gave us bad information. We need to be able to slush out information that no longer serves us and get to the truth of what's holding us back because of it. We can learn to have beautiful, raw conversations with honesty and love. Then we can begin to change the generations so that our behaviors are better suited for the future. Our parents didn't know better. Even if they did and they were being vindictive because of a divorce, we can allow ourselves to question their motives and not deny ourselves the happiness that we deserve. So that's just a little bit of a little snippet of a movie that I saw that really made me question how we love and the things that have been told to us as truths. And then no one came back and said, hold on, honey, that wasn't true. So sorry. Let's redo this. So Until next time, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we are going to dive into some fun topics for next time. And until then, we'll see you later, peeps.